Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into some massive proposals coming out of Washington that could seriously impact your wallet. We're talking healthcare, taxes, the whole shebang. Let's break it down.
All right, so what are we really talking about here? Well, these aren't small tweaks. We're looking at plans that could totally change how millions of you buy health insurance and maybe even put a nice tax refund right into your bank account. So let's jump right in, starting with the really big topic, healthcare.
Okay, so first on the docket is healthcare. And the idea being floated isn't just a minor adjustment. No, it's a complete overhaul of the subsidy system we've all gotten used to over the last, 10 plus years?
So the core idea is actually pretty straightforward. Right now, the government gives money to big insurance companies to bring down your costs. The new proposal? Cut out the middleman. Give that money directly to you, the people, so you can go out and shop for the health insurance plan that you actually want.
And this is where you see the huge difference. Under the current system, the Affordable Care Act, those subsidy dollars, they go straight to the insurance companies. But with this new plan, that money would be redirected, sent right to you as an individual. You get the cash. You get the choice.
And listen, this is a really big deal. We're not talking about a small group of people. With the current ACA subsidies about to expire, this whole debate directly impacts 22 million Americans. That's a huge number of people who could be looking at their insurance costs going through the roof if nothing changes.
The argument being made is that the current setup has just made the insurance industry incredibly rich. This idea of redirecting the money is part of a much bigger theme we're seeing, putting money back into the hands of everyday people. And that's the perfect segue to our next big topic, your taxes.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk directly about your money, your wallet. There's a plan on the table called the Working Family Tax Cut Act, and as the name suggests, it's all about delivering some major tax relief straight to you.
So what's actually in this plan? Well, a few big things. If you're a worker, imagine no federal taxes on your tips or your overtime. Pretty huge, right? For families, it's talking about a bigger child tax credit and a much larger standard deduction for married couples. And for seniors, the goal is to lighten that Social Security tax load. Okay, but here's the really interesting part. The timing. The idea is to make this law retroactive, meaning it would apply to the entire year that's already passed. Now, think about it. Most of us didn't change our tax withholding, right? So that could mean a pretty substantial lump sum refund coming all at once.
So what does that actually mean in dollars and cents? Well, the estimates floating around suggest that the average household could see a refund somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. We could see that hit early next year, assuming this whole thing becomes law.
But hold on. Whenever you start talking about moving around billions of dollars, whether it's subsidies or tax refunds, a massive question pops up. Can the government actually handle all that money without it disappearing? And that exact question brings us to our next topic, and it's a doozy. Some really explosive allegations of massive fraud.
I mean, the scale of this alleged fraud is just staggering. Get this. Federal authorities are looking at about $18 billion spent on certain Medicaid programs in Minnesota. And they think that half of it, a whopping $9 billion, might have just vanished due to fraud.
And to put a finer point on it, let's look at just one example that came up, a single-state housing program. It started with a pretty modest budget, just $2 million a year. But by the time they shut it down, its spending had exploded to $161 million. That's more than 80 times the original estimate. And the reason cited? Overwhelming fraud.
So, what's the response? Well, the state's governor has reportedly set up a new office specifically to fight fraud. But according to Congressman Emmer, who was the source for this, that action is coming something like 7 years after these problems really started to surface. All right, so you've got these massive policy ideas on one hand and these really serious fraud allegations on the other. It's a lot to take in. So the big question is, what's Congress's actual game plan to move forward and get anything done?
Well, according to the interview, when Congress gets back, it's all hands on deck for one thing, getting the government funding bills passed. They're calling it Job 1. The plan is to be really aggressive about it, pushing through bills every week to get everything done by the end of January and, avoid a government shutdown.
And what about after that? Looking beyond those immediate deadlines, they're already thinking about other ways to get things done. There's a legislative tool on the table called reconciliation, which is basically a way to pass some of these huge policy goals, like the healthcare and tax stuff we just talked about, without getting stuck in the usual political gridlock. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we're talking about healthcare subsidies, tax refunds, or stopping fraud. It really all comes down to one simple, powerful word: accountability.
And it leaves us with this final, crucial question that hangs over all of these plans. When billions of your dollars are on the line, how can we, the citizens, really track where that money goes and make sure it ends up where it was promised?